But one thing you mentioned earlier, Kelsey, that I'm really interested in kind of getting your take on, you mentioned daylight feed sign looks different from nighttime feed sign. Could you explain that and the difference between the two?
Man, it's really not the feed sign that looks any difference. It's where it relates to where your deer are bedding. Um, I'm not a bed hunter. I don't know about y'all, but it does not do me any good really to hunt beds where I hunt. It's rocky, it's loud. I don't have a predominant wind this, that way, or the third. To get in there and try to hunt a bed would be committing suicide deer hunting wise. You know what I mean? So if I'm in the middle of like a wide open stand of timber and I see this awesome deer sign, that's nighttime sign to me. When I get to that thick zone, I'm talking, I know the deer bed on this side of this ridge because there's a nasty privet or a nasty pines, or in Tennessee, it's kudzu a lot of times. There's a nasty kudzu thicket. And I mean, I shouldn't have said that. I'm joking. I'm messing with y'all. If I know there's a nasty thicket somewhere and I get like this year, for instance, there was a right where that buck had that doe pinned down, just on the other side of him, there is a nasty kudzu thicket. And on the way to it, you have to start getting into scattered pines. And in there was a few big wild oak acorn trees that were just obliterated. I'm talking about rubs, scrapes, feed sign, fresh poo, everything that you'd want to sit on. I did sit on, saw 2 good bucks and 5 or 6 does. Nothing I want to kill, but one of them I would go in there and make sure he's still in there and try and kill him this year. He's freaking sweet. He had a big extra beam. He was cool. That's when I start getting into that like daylight feed sign. That's my opinion on like the difference. And Richard talked about that. I love Richard. Richard's a good dude. He's helped me in a lot of ways. But, just like if you're in the bottoms and I guess anywhere in the Delta between Arkansas and Mississippi, when you get into a big blowdown area, places where there's tons of trees blowed down, you got that water mixed with it, and you find some of that hot feed sign in there, just probably time to climb a tree rather than being out where the timber's still good and green and tall. You get into some big blowdown areas and, there's buck brush around one of those lakes and there's water as well to where those deer can use that water as cover. They use it, kind of like a sound barrier between them and whatever's coming into them. You tend to have more deer around you. So that's how I differentiate between daylight and nighttime feed sign.
Interesting. Okay. I'm digging that. I'm digging it. I want to get into the calling stuff because
all right, before you get that, I'm cutting you off. No, okay. Yeah. I don't want to get over calling quite yet. There's one other thing I want you to mention, or Kelsey, what I want to talk to you about. When you're going back to like this real steep hill country stuff, like kind of what you hunted in Arkansas. Sounds like Tennessee is not as aggressive as like what you were hunting in Arkansas, but like Arkansas, for example, a lot of that covers up top. How close? Like, are you looking for any specific kind of habitat? Or you talked about habitat edges, but like terrain features, like benches or anything like that you're trying to find, like the closest thing up to the top that these deer might come to once they leave those bedding areas and those thickets. Is there anything like that plays through your mind of like what you're looking for, like elevation wise? At the top of the ridge, halfway down the ridge, bottom third of the ridge, whatever that you're really trying to key in on.
Yes. And I feel comfortable saying this because most guys won't do this. Everybody wants to go to a saddle or a finger ridge. And that will work. Don't get me wrong. If you have your 270 and you're going to sit across and you're going to shoot one from 150 yards away. But for me and bow hunting, if a guy will take his time looking at, let's say we got a perfect straight the spine of a mountain that's covered in privet hedge, just privet and grass and Indian plum and just junk. You can't walk through without making a ton of noise. A lot of times, and it goes back to also like the topographical software that you use. If you have one of those really solid topography maps that show you every little bitty nook and cranny, you can do this without walking it. I only use Onyx when it comes to that kind of stuff because I'm not like I'm not a gear geek, as like I don't sit there and just look for the most, up to date technology. I don't find that fun. But if I can get on Google Earth or Onyx and see where that mountain crest over, you get out of that thick area and there's just a little bit of a shelf, not a shelf that you can see. And that's the thing. If you get on a shelf that everybody can see, everybody will be there because everybody's talking on podcasts. Everybody's great granddaddy shot a nice 10-pointer up there in 54. All those things come into play. But if you can dig deep on Google or on Onyx or just with your feet and find a little, just a little bitty just bench. And I mean, when you get there, it might not be much of anything. It might be 10 yards wide and 30 yards long. And it's just a little, and it's straight back to downhill. I have found that those deer love that if there's white oak acorns on them. And I keep on bringing white oak acorns up because in my part of Arkansas, that's the predominant fruit tree. I know in other places they eat other types of fruit trees, like you get down the river bottoms and it's those big nut-alls and stuff like that. But where I hunt, it's the white oak, just a regular standard old white oak acorn tree. If one of those places, you can find one of those places like that, and it's got white oaks on it, you're normally going to have deer sign. And like I said, it's going to be a lot for the area that you're looking for. And if it's not there, if there's not acorns on the ground or those deer haven't found it yet, just keep moving. Just whoop, chalk it up, check mark, keep going. But that's one of my favorite spots in the world. Me and one of my best friends, I burned a etch in my mind because if I would have done this, we would have both shot 130-inch deer in the same sit on the first sit together in this one spot. We come up over these two hills, we roll over the top, and we hit one of those little bitty, tiny benches like that. And when I tell y'all there was so much buck and feed sign, this was like October the 10th. It was this when they were still like batched up. And we get in there and I'm looking at the white oaks and I'm looking at these red oaks. I'm like, man, the red oaks have more sign on them. But those white oaks, man, it's time for white oaks. Like those red oaks were dropping 2 weeks ago. That's why they were eating those. I need to sit on those white oaks. But man, there's a lot of sign on these red oaks. And I set up under those red oaks. And about 4:00, this buck comes barreling out of this privet thicket over the top of the mountain. And he was getting chased by a bigger buck. And they both were like just super sweet 8-pointers, probably 100. The first one's probably 125 and the second one's probably like 130, 135. They're both really awesome bucks. And if we would have been set up 40 yards to the left, we could have shot both of them under this big white oak tree because they both came barreling off, fed for a little bit, started fighting, and just made their way off. And that has burned a scar in my mind forever. So